Welcome to the Greater Cincinnati Water Works Richard Miller Treatment Plant. This plant provides about 85% of the water provided to our customers. The structure, which looks like a lighthouse or a castle, is the original intake structure constructed in the early 1900s, going into service in 1907, along with the rest of the original treatment plant. This structure is still in operation today. The larger square structure next to it is the intake and pump station for Northern Kentucky Water District. Both of these intakes, as well as a second intake built by Cincinnati in the 1960s, were constructed on the Kentucky side of the river because it is the deepest part of the river. This ensures we will always have a water supply even during a drought. In order to get the water from the intake to the treatment plant, a 7-foot diameter tunnel was mined through the bedrock almost 70 feet below the bottom of the river. This tunnel was lined in brick and connects the intake to the original pumping station on the Cincinnati side of the river. The pumping station originally pumped water from the river to the first treatment step using 4 large steam-powered pumps. Weighing in at over 1,400 tons and 104 feet high, these pumps were the largest of their kind and custom-built for Cincinnati. The pumps still reside inside Old River Station, but have since been replaced by smaller, more efficient electric pumps. These new pumps have the capacity to provide 90 million gallons of water a day. Even though they no longer pump water, the original steam-powered pumps still provide a vital service. The Old River Station is so deep and close enough to the river that without the weight of the original pumps, the building would be in jeopardy of popping up out of the ground like a cork. In the early 1960s, to increase capacity and provide redundancy, the Water Works constructed a second pumping station called the Ohio River Plant, ORP for short. ORP is supplied by a second intake and tunnel, 10 feet in diameter and over 3,000 feet long. This intake is submerged and cannot be seen from shore. ORP has been in service since 1963 and has a pumping capacity of 220 million gallons of water per day using 4 2,000 horsepower pumps. The pumps can still be controlled using the original control room if needed. Once the water leaves the river, it is pumped from either one of the raw water pump stations up to the California Golf Course. This property is part of the Greater Cincinnati Water Works treatment system, although many of the golfers probably don't know it. The water first goes into a building that we call the Lamella facility. This facility was constructed in 1984 and serves as the first step to remove particles such as clay, silt, or plant debris from the water. You'll notice as we go on our tour that we have many steps at the treatment plant for particle removal. That is one of the most important functions of the plant. As part of the treatment process, we add 2 chemicals, aluminum sulfate, which we call alum, and also a small amount of a cationic polymer. These chemicals encourage the small particles to stick together in larger clumps, which can then settle out of the water. Inside the Lamella facility, the water travels through chambers specifically designed to help the particles clump together. Once the water leaves these chambers, it travels up a series of inclined plates inside 6 different basins. These are called Lamella plate packs. This design causes the silts and clays to settle out very rapidly in a short distance. By having multiple basins, we can take one basin out of service for cleaning or repairs and continue to treat water. The silts and clays which are removed by the lamella basins are returned to the river in a dilute stream of water. After the water leaves the lamella building, it travels into two settling reservoirs. These are the large artificial lakes on the California Golf Course. These reservoirs were part of the original plant construction in 1907 and are still lined with the original hand-laid brick. These reservoirs hold over 300 million gallons of usable water. When the plant was originally constructed, prior to the lamella building, the water would enter the settling reservoirs directly from the river, and then that is where most of the particles would settle out. The solids built up so quickly we would clean these reservoirs sometimes every other year. With the addition of the lamella facility, we now only need to drain and clean these reservoirs once every 10 to 12 years. In addition to providing additional settling, these reservoirs also serve as off-river storage. We can shut off the raw water pumps and continue to treat water without pumping from the river. This is very useful during times of river spills. We are able to shut off the intakes to minimize contamination entering the plant. Depending on the time of year, the reservoirs hold between 2 and 3 days of storage. The settling reservoirs were designed to be the highest point of the treatment plant. Water could flow by gravity from the settling reservoirs through the entire treatment plant without being repumped. This was a valuable design feature because it increased the reliability of the treatment process. We did not need to depend on pumps within the treatment plant. That design was altered in 1992, however, with the addition of granular activated carbon. We'll discuss that process later. Once the water leaves the settling reservoirs, it flows down the hill to the building we refer to as Chem House East. This is a building where additional chemicals, lime to adjust the pH, and if needed, iron and potassium permanganate to aid in the filtration of the water are added. Lime is added all of the time, but the iron and potassium permanganate are only added with more challenging water conditions. Also housed at Chem House East are 2 modern water wheels, which recapture some of the energy of the water flowing down the hill to generate electricity. We installed these water wheels in 1936 and have been generating electricity with them ever since. While they only generate a small percentage of our electrical needs, on average they produce enough electricity for 155 homes, and they save us about $85,000 a year in electrical cost. After leaving Chem House East, the water travels through 2 additional basins to allow some additional settling time, and then on to the sand filter gallery. Inside the sand filter gallery are housed 47 sand filters. Each sand filter is capable of filtering 6 million gallons of water a day. This process is known as rapid sand filtration. The process of using coagulation, flocculation, sedimentation, and rapid sand filtration was researched and pioneered here at Cincinnati with the construction of the Miller plant. This treatment process is now referred to as conventional treatment, but at the time was cutting-edge technology. Each sand filter has about 24 to 27 inches of sand, which is underlain by supporting gravel and drains. The water enters at the top of the filter and percolates down through the sand, and most particles that haven't been removed up to this point will be removed by the sand. The water travels through the gravel and into perforated underdrains, which direct the water to the next treatment step. As the particles build up in the sand filters, the filters eventually become dirty and clogged and need to be cleaned. Depending on the time of year, the sand filters need to be cleaned every few days. This is done by a process we call backwashing the filter. During backwashing, we reverse the flow of water in the sand filter and push clean water back up through the sand, where it flows into troughs above the sand and is sent to a waste line. The operators manage this process very carefully to ensure that dirty water enters the troughs while keeping the sand in the filter. This process cleans the sand, and the sand can then be reused. After about 10 to 15 years or so, the sand will become too degraded to filter properly, and it will then be replaced. For many years, the sand filters were the last step in the treatment process except for adding chlorine and fluoride. This is how many surface water treatment plants still operate. However, in 1977, a company in Charleston, West Virginia, spilled 70 tons of a chemical called carbon tetrachloride into the Kanawha River, which is a tributary to the Ohio River. This chemical traveled downstream for more than 250 miles, was taken into our treatment plant, and was discovered in our customers' taps. At the time, we had no capability to treat or analyze for this type of chemical. This served as a wake-up call to the city, and everyone realized we needed additional protection from spills on an industrialized river like the Ohio. Cincinnati, along with the help of the US EPA and others, began a long research and design project to build what is now the Granular Activated Carbon, or GAC facility. This part of the plant went into service in 1992. The GAC facility consists of 12 contactors, each with about 11.5 feet of activated carbon. The carbon acts like a sponge and absorbs organic compounds like gasoline or paint thinner. This process protects us from these types of spills, which are the most common spills of concern in the river. The GAC also removes natural organic matter, such as from decaying plants. This also helps with our treatment process. Natural organic matter reacts with the chlorine we add for disinfection and forms chemicals known as disinfection byproducts. These chemicals may cause cancer or other health problems, so we want to minimize them. The GAC helps us do that by removing the natural organic matter so it cannot react with the chlorine. As a result, we do not need to add nearly as much chlorine to the water as we would without the GAC, and the disinfection byproducts are minimized. Eventually, the GAC becomes saturated with the organic chemicals and natural organic matter. When this happens, the carbon is put through a process called reactivation. The carbon is transferred to a furnace, which gradually heats it to a temperature of 1600 degrees Fahrenheit. This drives off the organic chemicals without destroying the GAC. Once the GAC cools down, it is transferred back to the contactor where it can be reused. During each reactivation process, a small percentage, around 6 to 8% of the carbon, is lost in the reactivation process and needs to be replenished with fresh carbon. Through this process, all of the GAC is gradually replaced over time. We are one of the few water treatment plants who can reactivate our own GAC. This allows us to tailor the reactivation process to our needs and is more cost-effective than shipping the carbon to a contractor for reactivation. We've left the GAC, but we are not done yet. The water now moves on to our newest treatment process, ultraviolet disinfection. In 2013, we installed UV to provide additional protection against microbiological contamination. The original research for this facility also began with a disaster, fortunately not one in Cincinnati. In 1993, the city of Milwaukee suffered one of the largest known waterborne disease outbreaks when their water supply became contaminated with a waterborne organism called Cryptosporidium, or crypto for short. When a person is infected with crypto, it causes intestinal illness with symptoms such as diarrhea, fever, nausea, and vomiting. While healthy people generally recover from this illness, it can be fatal for immunocompromised individuals. It is estimated 400,000 people became ill and 69 died as a result of the Milwaukee outbreak. This event resulted in several regulatory and water treatment changes industry-wide to ensure this would not happen again. GCWW implemented those changes, but also began researching additional ways to protect against these types of diseases. This research, combined with the installation of additional sewage facilities upstream of our intake, resulted in the decision to install UV disinfection. UV does not replace chlorine disinfection, but instead it works with it to fully disinfect the water. Some organisms are easily destroyed by UV and not by chlorine. Other organisms are easily destroyed by chlorine and not UV. So between the two, we achieve much more protection against this type of contamination. The UV building consists of 8 treatment units called reactors. Each reactor has a diameter of 48 inches and contains 5 20 kilowatt bulbs inside watertight quartz sleeves. The bulbs look similar to a long fluorescent bulb, but they emit high-intensity UV light. The water travels past the bulbs but does not come in contact with the bulbs because of the quartz sleeve. The UV light travels through the sleeve and is in contact with the water for only a few seconds. That is long enough for the UV light to render the organisms non-infectious. The UV light uses no chemicals and it leaves no residual in the water. It's a very clean and efficient process. Automated monitors measure the water quality going into the UV reactors and adjusts the intensity of the light to achieve just the right amount of disinfection. This ensures the minimum amount of electricity is used and makes the system very efficient. As part of the design of the UV building, solar cells were installed on top of the building. While they do not directly power the UV building, they do offset a portion of the costs. After the water flows through the UV building, sodium hexametaphosphate is added to minimize scale in the distribution system. Fluoride is added to help prevent tooth decay. Caustic soda is added to prevent corrosion in the distribution system. And finally, chlorine is added for disinfection. Once these chemicals are added, the water is stored in 2 underground clear wells. Clearwell 1 can store about 24 million gallons of water, and Clearwell 2 can store a little bit over 5 million gallons. The time the water spends in the clear wells ensures that chlorine has sufficient time to disinfect the water before it is sent into the distribution system and to our customers' taps. Thank you for taking a quick virtual tour of the Richard Miller Treatment Plant. We are very proud of our treatment facilities and hope you can come and visit us for an in-person tour in the future.